You keep letting everyone think that promotion was all strategy and late nights on your part. Ryan texted me the details last week after the client dinner. He said the only reason they moved forward was the relationship I had already built with their VP. If your brother knew how many of those calls I took for you when you were stuck in meetings, he might not be nodding along like it was all you. Aunt Diane can keep smiling about how far you've come, but the thread from January makes it pretty clear who actually moved the pieces. I'm tired of sitting here while you rewrite what really happened in front of the people who are supposed to know better. Hi, my name is Olivia Bennett. I am 32 years old. I folded my napkin and stood up from the long table without answering him. The cottage's main room stayed quiet behind me as I stepped onto the screened porch. Eric had stopped mid-sentence. Patricia and Thomas exchanged one of their practiced looks. Aunt Diane held the serving spoon halfway to the bowl of corn. No one followed me right away. We had driven up to Door County 4 days earlier after a week at work that ended with 2 team members resigning and a client threatening to pull the contract I had spent 6 months building. Michael had said the cottage would give us room to think. Eric had joined us on the 3rd day, and Aunt Diane had arrived with Patricia and Thomas the morning after. The place still smelled like the cedar chests Thomas kept in the upstairs bedrooms. I had not expected the conversation to turn the way it did over dinner. Michael had started the comments about my promotion 2 months before the trip. At first they came in private. He would mention Ryan Sullivan's name while we were folding laundry or driving to the store, always with a detail about how deals actually closed. I had learned to let most of them pass. The promotion had been the first time I led a full client acquisition at the consulting firm, and the contract we signed was the largest the Midwest office had brought in that year. Michael worked in enterprise sales for a software company that sometimes overlapped with the same hospitals and clinic networks. Ryan worked on his team. The night before we left the city, Michael had stood in the kitchen and told me the client had only signed because Ryan had made an introduction 6 weeks earlier. I had the signed paperwork on my laptop. The introduction had happened, but it had come after I already had 3 meetings with their procurement lead and had written the proposal that addressed their specific compliance gaps. I had not argued then. I had closed the laptop and gone to bed. At the cottage the first 2 evenings stayed ordinary. We grilled on the small deck that faced the water. Eric talked about a difficult audit he was handling. Patricia asked about the new house Michael and I had looked at before the promotion news came through. On the 3rd evening Eric brought up the contract during dinner. He asked how the transition to leading the team felt. Michael answered before I could. Those 5 sentences landed while the food was still on the plates. I did not correct the timeline about the introduction or the calls. I did not ask him to show the text from Ryan. I simply stood and walked to the porch. The screen door clicked shut behind me. Through it I could hear someone pick up a fork again, but no one spoke. I opened the messaging app on my phone and scrolled to the thread Michael and I had used for work logistics over the past year. Most of it was ordinary. One exchange from January sat near the top. He had forwarded an email I had sent him about the client's initial concerns. Under it he had written to Ryan that the client would have walked if he had not stepped in on the pricing call. Ryan had replied with a single line, classic. She gets the title, you get the real work. Michael had answered with a laughing emoji and nothing else. I read it twice. The email itself was still in my sent folder. I had never deleted it. The forward had happened on a night when I was traveling for another meeting. I had not known he sent it. The screen door opened again. Michael stepped out and closed it behind him. He stood with his back to the cottage and his hands in his pockets. You could have stayed at the table, he said. You could have kept Ryan's name out of the conversation, I answered. He gave a short laugh that did not reach his eyes. Ryan was just venting. You know how he gets after a long quarter. It doesn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to repeat it in front of my brother and your parents. Michael leaned against the porch rail. They were going to find out eventually that the deal wasn't as clean as you made it sound. Better it comes from me than from someone outside the family. I kept my voice even. The client signed because I rewrote their intake process and cut their projected implementation time by 40%. The introduction helped. It did not close it. He looked out at the water. You always need the last word on the numbers. I did not answer. The family group chat notification appeared at the top of my screen. Aunt Diane had forwarded a message. The preview showed only the subject line from the January thread, Client Pricing Call Notes, Bennett. I opened it. The full chain between Michael and Ryan now sat in the chat that included Eric, Patricia, Thomas, and me. Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket at the same moment. He glanced at it, then at mine. She must have hit the wrong thread, he said. I watched the typing indicator appear in the family chat. Eric's name showed first. Then Patricia's. No one had replied yet, but they were reading. Michael stayed where he was. We can talk about this inside after they leave the table. I stayed on the porch. The water moved against the dock in small, steady waves. Inside the cottage someone set a glass down too hard. The sound carried through the screen. I stayed on the porch long enough to see the first reply appear in the family chat. Eric had typed only 3 words, "What is this?" Patricia had started typing and then stopped. I closed the app without answering either of them. Michael had already gone back inside. I followed a minute later. The table had been cleared except for 2 glasses of water. Aunt Diane stood at the sink with her back to the room. Thomas sat in the armchair near the window, phone in his hand. Eric leaned against the counter, arms crossed. No one looked at me when I came in. Michael spoke first. Diane hit the wrong thread. It was an old work exchange. Nothing worth reading into. Eric kept his eyes on his phone. It looks like more than an old exchange. Aunt Diane turned off the faucet but did not face us. I was trying to send the grocery list for tomorrow. The attachment came from the wrong folder. Thomas set his phone face down on the arm of the chair. We can talk about it in the morning. It's late. Michael nodded as if that settled it. Exactly. We're all tired. Olivia and I will sort it out. I did not sit. There is nothing to sort. The thread is there. You wrote it. Ryan answered it. You forwarded it to him 3 months ago. Michael gave the same short laugh he had used on the porch. You're making it sound deliberate. It was one conversation after a long day. People vent about work. It doesn't change what actually happened with the client. Eric finally looked up. It changes how it sounds when you say it at the table in front of everyone. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Patricia had not spoken at all. She kept her hands folded in her lap and watched the floor between her shoes. I walked past them to the small bedroom we had been using on the main floor. Michael followed and closed the door. He stayed near it while I sat on the edge of the bed. You could have let it go at dinner, he said. Instead you made a scene by walking out. I did not make a scene. I removed myself from one. He crossed his arms. Your family is already reading too much into it because you left. Now they think there's some big secret when it was just Ryan blowing off steam. I kept my voice level. The secret was that you have been telling him for months that my work only succeeds because of what you do behind it. That is not venting. That is a story you chose to tell someone outside this family. Michael stepped closer to the bed. Ryan is not outside the family. He has been on my team for 4 years. He understands how these deals actually work. You want credit for every line item. I want the people who matter to see the full picture. The full picture includes the proposal I wrote and the 3 follow-up meetings I led without you on the call. He shook his head once. You always need the numbers to prove you were essential. The client signed after I adjusted the pricing on that last call. That is what Ryan saw. That is what I told him. I stood up. The movement forced him to take half a step back. Then show them the full email chain. Not the one you forwarded to Ryan. The one that shows every revision I made before you ever joined the pricing discussion. Michael's expression did not change. I am not going to turn this into a presentation for your brother and my parents. They do not need to see every draft. They already saw the version you wanted them to see. He studied me for a moment. You are going to make this bigger than it has to be. We can still have the rest of the week here without turning it into something it is not. I did not sit back down. The week is already changed. The thread is in the group chat. Everyone who was at the table has read it or will read it by morning. Michael opened the door again. Then we deal with it in the morning like adults. I am going to take a walk. You should get some sleep. He left the room. I stayed where I was. Through the closed door I could hear low voices in the main room but no clear words. After a few minutes the front door opened and closed. Michael had gone outside. I opened my laptop on the small desk in the corner. The client folder was still there from the week before the trip. I found the original proposal and the version that had been sent after the pricing call. The changes Michael had made were minor. The core structure and the compliance language that had addressed the client's main objections were mine. I saved both versions to a new folder and closed the laptop. My phone lit up with a message from Jenna Walsh. She had not been part of the family chat, but Eric must have told her something. The message read only, "Call me when you can." Eric said something happened at the cottage. I did not call her yet. I sat on the edge of the bed again and waited for the next sound from the main room. The cottage stayed quiet for a long time. Then I heard footsteps on the porch and the screen door opening once more. Someone had come back inside. It was Aunt Diane. She knocked once on the bedroom door before opening it partway. I did not mean to forward that thread, she said. I had two folders open and I clicked the wrong one. I deleted it from the chat as soon as I realized, but Eric and Patricia had already seen it. I nodded. It does not change what is in it. Aunt Diane stayed in the doorway. Michael has always been careful with how he talks about work in front of us. I did not expect to see it written that way. She waited, but I did not fill the silence. After a moment she closed the door again. I listened to her footsteps move back toward the kitchen. The water ran for a short time, then stopped. I lay on top of the covers without changing into sleep clothes. The window above the desk was open. I could hear the water against the dock and, farther out, the occasional sound of a boat moving across the lake. Michael had not come back inside yet. The group chat stayed silent. No one had replied to Eric's 3 words or to anything else. At some point after midnight I heard the front door open and close again. Michael's footsteps crossed the main room and stopped outside the bedroom door. He did not knock. He simply turned the handle and came in. He stood at the foot of the bed for several seconds before speaking. "They are all still awake," he said. "Your brother asked me if I wanted to explain the thread. I told him it was old and not worth the energy." I kept my eyes on the ceiling. "Did he believe you?" Michael sat on the edge of the mattress. "It does not matter what he believes tonight. What matters is that we do not let this turn into a family referendum on how I support your work." I turned my head to look at him. "You already turned it into that when you said it at the table." He reached for my hand. I did not move it toward him. After a moment, he pulled his hand back. "We can still fix this," he said. "In the morning we tell them it was a misunderstanding about one call and move on. No one has to know the rest of it." I sat up. "What is the rest of it?" Michael stood again. Nothing that changes anything between us. Ryan and I talk about work the way anyone on a team talks about work. You do the same with your colleagues. It does not mean the promotion was not real or that you did not earn it. He walked to the door. Before he opened it, he looked back once. Get some rest. We will deal with whatever they ask in the morning. The door closed behind him. I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed. The screen of my phone had gone dark, but the notification light still blinked once every few seconds from the group chat. No new messages appeared. Everyone was waiting. I opened the app anyway. The thread Michael had forwarded to Ryan was still visible even after Aunt Diane tried to delete it. Eric had screenshotted it before it disappeared. The image sat in the chat now, time-stamped from 3 months earlier. Michael's words were there in the same order he had spoken them at dinner and in the same order he had written them to Ryan. Below the screenshot, Eric had typed one more line: "We are not going to pretend this is nothing." No one else had replied. The typing indicator did not appear again. I closed the app and set the phone on the desk. The cottage was quiet except for the sound of the water. Michael had not come back to the bedroom. I could hear him moving in the kitchen, the low sound of a cabinet closing, then nothing. I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed until the light outside the window began to change. When the first boat engine started somewhere on the lake, I stood and opened the bedroom door. Michael was already at the table with a cup of coffee. Eric sat across from him. Neither of them spoke when I came into the room. Aunt Diane stood at the counter cutting fruit. Patricia and Thomas had not come downstairs yet. Eric looked at me. We need to talk about what was in that thread. Before anyone else gets here. Michael set his cup down. There is nothing new to talk about. It was one exchange after a difficult quarter. Eric did not look away from me. Then why did you say the same things at dinner last night? The question hung between us. Michael did not answer it. He picked up his coffee again and drank. The sound of the spoon against the cutting board stopped. Aunt Diane waited with the knife still in her hand. I stayed standing near the doorway. The water outside had turned lighter with the morning. A small boat passed the end of the dock, its engine low and steady. No one moved to close the window. Eric spoke again, quieter this time. If that is how you talk about her work when you think no one in the family is listening, then we already have something to talk about. Michael set the cup down harder than he needed to. The sound carried across the room. He looked at Eric first, then at me. We are not doing this now, he said. Not with everyone still half asleep and the week barely started. I answered before Eric could. The week started 3 days ago. The thread started 3 months ago. It is already here. Michael pushed the chair back and stood. He walked to the porch door without looking at any of us. The screen closed behind him with the same quiet click it had made the night before. Eric stayed at the table. Aunt Diane set the knife down on the cutting board. No one spoke for a long moment. Outside, Michael's footsteps moved down the wooden steps toward the dock. The boat engine had faded. The only sound left was the water against the shore. Eric looked at me again. You do not have to stay here and let him keep doing this. I did not sit. I did not answer him yet. The light on the lake had turned the color of the early sun. Michael stood at the end of the dock with his back to the cottage. He had his phone in his hand. I could see the screen light even from the doorway. A new notification appeared on my own phone. It was from the family chat. Eric had sent a single line to the group that now included everyone who had been at the table the night before. We are not going to pretend this is nothing. The message stayed at the top of the screen. No one replied. The typing indicator did not appear. Michael did not turn around. He stayed at the end of the dock, phone still in his hand, while the water moved steadily against the wood beneath his feet. I stayed in the doorway and watched Michael at the end of the dock. He had turned his phone screen toward the water as if the light would help him read something that was not there. Eric's message sat at the top of the family chat. No one had added anything beneath it. I walked outside without shoes. The wood of the steps felt cool under my feet. When I reached the dock, Michael did not look up right away. He kept his eyes on the phone until I stopped a few feet from him. "They are waiting for an answer," I said. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "There is no answer that will satisfy them. They have already decided what the thread means. They decided after you said the same things at the table. The thread only confirmed it." Michael turned to face me. The morning light made the lines around his eyes sharper than they had looked the night before. "You are going to let this become the only thing anyone remembers about the trip. About the promotion. About us." I kept my voice even. "The promotion is already done. The contract is signed. What they remember is how you chose to talk about it when you thought no one was listening." He took one step closer. "Ryan is not family. What I wrote to him stays between us. You turning it into a family issue is what is going to damage things. It was already damaged when you brought his name into the room last night." Michael looked past me toward the cottage. Through the window I could see Eric still at the table and Aunt Diane moving around the kitchen. Patricia and Thomas had come downstairs. They stood near the counter but did not sit. "You have a choice," Michael said. "You can let them raid one old thread and turn it into a story about me undermining you, or you can tell them it was work venting and move forward with the week we planned." I did not move. "I am not going to rewrite what is already written." He studied me for several seconds. Then he walked past me toward the cottage without another word. Inside, the conversation had already started. Eric had printed the screenshot of the thread and placed it in the center of the table. Patricia sat with her hands folded again. Thomas stood behind her chair. Aunt Diane had stopped cutting fruit. When Michael came through the door, everyone turned. Eric spoke first. "We read it. All of it. Not just the part you showed at dinner." Michael pulled out the chair across from Eric, and Saturday it was one exchange. After a quarter where 3 deals almost died because of pricing issues she had not prepared for. I stayed near the doorway. The pricing issues were in the client's original requirements. I addressed them in the 3rd revision. You joined the call after that revision was already sent. Michael did not look at me. "You are going to argue line by line in front of everyone?" Eric answered before I could. "We are not arguing. We are looking at what you wrote to someone outside this family and then repeated here." Aunt Diane set the knife down. "Michael, I have known you since you were 22. You have never spoken about Olivia's work that way in front of us. Seeing it written changes how the last few months sound." Patricia finally spoke. Her voice was quiet. "Thomas and I came here because we thought the week would give everyone space after the promotion stress. This is not space." Michael leaned back in the chair. "Then we can end the week early. Olivia and I can go back to the city today. The rest of you can stay." I stepped forward from the doorway. "I am not going back with you today." The room went still. Michael turned his head slowly toward me. "You are going to make this decision in front of them?" "I already made it last night when I read the rest of the thread. You have been sending Ryan updates on every project I lead for 6 months. Not venting. Updates on how you are managing the narrative so the family sees you as the one keeping things stable." Eric picked up the printed screenshot. "There are 5 more exchanges here. All from the last 4 months. All with the same tone." Michael stood. The chair scraped against the floor. "That is my work life. It does not belong on this table." "It came to this table because you brought it here," I said. "You chose the words at dinner. You chose to forward the thread to Ryan. You chose to keep doing it after the promotion was public. He walked to the porch door again but did not open it. If you leave now, you are choosing to turn one old conversation into the end of everything we have built. I stayed where I was. What we built is already changed. The thread shows how you wanted it to look to everyone else. Thomas cleared his throat. We are not going to decide the marriage at this table. That is between the two of you. Patricia nodded once. But we are not going to pretend we did not see it either. Aunt Diane looked at me. What do you need right now, Olivia? I answered without looking at Michael. I need to pack. Then I need to call Jenna and ask if I can stay at her place until I find something else. Michael turned from the door. You are not serious. I am. He crossed the room and stopped in front of me. His voice dropped. You are going to throw away 4 years because of one thread and one dinner. You are going to let your brother and my parents watch you walk out. I am going to stop letting you rewrite what I have done in front of the people who are supposed to know the difference. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he walked out of the cottage without his keys or his phone. The screen door closed behind him. We heard his car start a minute later and pull away from the gravel drive. No one spoke for several minutes. Eric folded the printed screenshot and slid it toward me. I took it and put it in my bag. Aunt Diane finished cutting the fruit and left the bowl on the counter. Patricia and Thomas went upstairs without saying when they would come back down. I went to the bedroom and packed the few things I had brought. The laptop went into its case last. I left the ring Michael had given me on the desk where the light from the window would hit it. Then I walked back to the main room. Eric stood near the door. I can drive you to Jenna's if you want. Or I can stay here and make sure he does not come back until you are gone. I will drive myself. But thank you for saying it out loud last night. Aunt Diane came over and touched my arm once. The cottage will still be here. But I understand why you will not be. I nodded. There was nothing else to add. I walked to my car, put the bag in the back seat, and drove away from the gravel drive without looking in the rearview mirror. The water stayed behind me. The thread stayed in the family chat. Michael stayed wherever he had driven. 2 weeks later I signed a 6-month lease on a small apartment near my office. Jenna helped me move the few boxes I had taken from the house. Eric called once to say that Michael had come back to the cottage the next day, packed his own things, and left without speaking to anyone. Patricia and Thomas had stayed the rest of the week and then gone home. No one had asked me to come back. I did not delete the thread. I kept the screenshot and the original emails in a folder on my laptop. On the day I started the new project at work, I opened the folder once, read the first exchange, and closed it again. The words had not changed. Neither had what I had chosen to do about them. Michael sent one message 3 weeks after I left. It said only that he had told Ryan to stop asking about me and that the family knew the thread had been misunderstood. I did not answer. I blocked the number after that. The cottage in Door County is still there. Thomas still owns it. I have not been back. Eric goes sometimes with his own family now. He sends pictures of the water and the dock but never asks if I want to see it again. I do not. I still work at the same firm. The contract I closed before the trip remains the largest the office has signed this year. No one there knows about the thread or the cottage. They only know the version I present in meetings and in the reports I write. That version is the one I built. It is the one I keep. The loss is quiet. It is the conversations that will never happen again at that table, the stories Thomas used to tell about the summers his own father brought him to the same water, the way Patricia used to ask about my week without measuring it against Michael's. Those things belonged to a version of the family that included me. They do not anymore. What remains is the record I did not let anyone rewrite. The promotion, the contract, the work I actually did. The choice to stand up from the table and keep walking until the only story left was the one I could live with. That choice did not bring the family back together. It did not make Michael apologize for the months of messages. It did not return the summers at the cottage. It only returned to me the right to say what had actually happened and to stop carrying the version he had tried to hand me. I protected the part of my life that no one else could sign off on. Everything else I left on the dock the morning I drove away. Thank you for listening to my story. If someone you trusted had been quietly rewriting your work to the people who mattered most, would you have stayed at the table to argue, or would you have done what I did and taken the record with you when you left?